started. All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Jenny Davis. I'm the principal of Piedmont Hills. It is very nice to have all of you here today. I'm going to give a quick little intro and then turn it over to Emily Matthaei. In my blurb that I put about today's topic, I found a definition of executive functioning from Psychology Today, where they say executive functioning describes a set of processes and mental skills that help an individual plan, monitor, and successfully execute their goals. I've been in education for a really long time. This is, I think I'm my 25th year. So I'd have to do the math, but it's something like that. I have been a 504 coordinator, and as an administrator, I've sat in many IEP meetings and SST meetings and meetings with parents where kids are struggling. I am the parent of 2 children, one of which executive functioning was not a problem with my daughter. Like, she had other issues, but executive functioning was not an issue. My son, however, wow, he is all over the place. And the work I have to do as a parent to keep him organized, to keep him like where, so that he knows what he has to do, it's a lot. I can tell you my husband's probably going to watch this later. I think he watches these videos. He has executive functioning issues, constantly having to do reminders and things like that. And so we're going to be talking today about what executive functioning is. And my hope is that you may, as a parent, say like, oh, yes, this describes my kid. And then maybe you get some hints and some ideas of how to help them, because this is a very, very common thing that happens with a lot of people. And so I don't want you to think as we go into this, like if you do recognize a lot of these signs in your children, or maybe even in yourself, that there's anything wrong with you, because it is very, very common. So Emily, now let you introduce yourself and take over.
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Massey. I'm the school psychologist here. And Jenny, thank you for that introduction. That was perfect. And one of the things that I also, just wanted to piggyback off of that is it is kind of important to identify or reflect on, how we function in our own lives. A lot of, what you do as parents by modeling behavior, our kids do pick up. So just kind of being open and honest about our own functioning can, I think, really benefit our kids. And a lot of the things that I do with kids initially when we're working towards building executive functioning skills is shifting their mindset from, why can't I do this? More of a reflection on their self-worth or their self-esteem, and shifting that from this is a skill that I'm still building. So let me share my screen. Okay. So I included some different information that I felt like would be most important for parents to hear, just kind of going through what is executive functioning, understanding the processes involved, how deficits can present themselves and what's developmentally appropriate, and how you can support the growth of executive functioning in your student. So I like Ms. Davis's definition, and the definition can change. Most cases the utility can change, based on different areas. Behaviorists might consider it a different set of skills. But there are a lot of different sub-processes that are involved. And essentially, we're looking at what are the different sub-processes that are involved in executing a task. So I included just some, signs that there might be some executive dysfunction in adolescence. But what's important to note is that a lot of adolescents are going to present with weaknesses in executive dysfunction. And this is not due to anything that might necessarily need extra support. Sometimes students are just developmentally not able to perform tasks at a level that an adult would. And that's just largely due to the neurology of the brain and how it develops. But really, when we're looking at what's developmentally appropriate, we're looking at how well the student's able to carry out tasks compared to other students their age, and essentially what the impact is. So if we're seeing a significant impact in certain areas of functioning, like school functioning, then that could indicate that your student might need a little bit more support. So there are a lot of different things that can impact executive functioning, and I wanted to touch on this because we want to treat things differently depending on what can cause these weaknesses. So this can be caused by neurodevelopmental disorders, so students with ADHD or autism. There is a high correlation of students with learning disabilities and executive dysfunction, but it can also be caused by certain psychological disorders or trauma. And it's important to note that sometimes we see executive functioning weaknesses appear in adolescence. It can happen for different reasons. For example, sometimes the demands are higher in high school. We're expecting our kids to execute tasks more independently at this age. So sometimes they don't really present themselves until a little bit later, but sometimes there's actually a decrease in functioning that's due to a mood disorder. And usually there are some other observable changes that we see as well, and we do want to treat them differently. So obviously if there is an underlying mood disorder or trauma, we want to make sure that we're addressing that and not necessarily treating it as a developing skill. So there are also different impacts that can affect our functioning on a daily basis. Lack of sleep, poor diet, illness, blood sugar levels. So we just want to make sure that we take that into account when we're kind of gauging our students' executive functioning, not necessarily basing it on something that might have happened that day, but kind of observing over a period of time. So like I mentioned, there are different sub-processes that are included in the definition of executive functioning, and they do tend to vary, but I'm going to focus on the ones that I most commonly see in my role to be areas where students either struggle or could use some more support. So we're going to talk about attention, planning, organization, task initiation, time management, and self-regulation. So attention is kind of a loaded topic because neurologically it involves a lot of processes. So you have your controlled or your automatic attention. So controlled attention is actively sustaining your attention to a given stimuli. Automatic attention is involuntary. And it's driven by more primitive parts of the brain, kind of in those deeper structures there. And past experiences, can affect what drives our attention as well. For example, if you're at a cafe and you're talking to people, but you hear someone say your name, and it drives your attention almost automatically, even though you're not actively listening. That's kind of just an example of that automatic attention. I wanted to talk a little bit about working memory and inhibition and how they impact attention, and mainly because a lot of the interventions that you can provide for attention are in increasing working memory. So working memory is just the ability to temporarily store and manipulate information in your mind. Inhibition is blocking or delaying a response to a stimuli. So for example, if you've ever been working on something and something pops into your brain, oh, I have to do this, I forgot about this. Kind of inhibiting that response to change what you're doing so that you can focus on completing your task. So the development of controlled attention is largely impacted by development. And if you'll notice, as a young child, your kid was probably able to listen to 20 or 30 minutes of a story, and now they can, attend to a lecture of about 55 minutes. So we do expect that to grow with age. And usually we measure any deficits in this area through, observation, how they compare to other students their age, and the degree of impact. So planning is a mental process that involves taking actions to reach a goal. So developmentally, what's appropriate is, depending on even what grade your child is in, between 9th and 12th, this can vary. But, writing down daily homework, some long-term planning, such as choosing courses that might help your student graduate with all their necessary credits, or just breaking down a long-term assignment. So that would, that's what's appropriate, but it does vary between 9th and 12th grade as well. To improve planning, you can utilize checklists. I really love the idea of having a whiteboard or a monthly calendar, just because a lot of kids need that visual reminder, but also providing periodic reminders throughout. You can break down larger assignments, such as studying for a test or an essay, into individual parts with an end date, and providing periodic reminders. So, hey, we broke down this assignment, that first paragraph is due on Monday. Organization and planning are very closely related, in that a lot of tasks actually just require planning and organization concurrently. So organization does involve kind of a lot of different things. So it's, organizing your materials, your spaces, information. So organizing information in an essay, organizing your notes, making sure that you have binders and folders, and that things are going in the appropriate places. Keeping your room clean, or having a designated space to do homework and keeping that organized. So typically this will also range, but the goal is just to, build the skills that are necessary for that student. So there's a lot of different strategies for organization, and this is where I see a lot of variability in what might work for a student. So some things that you can try at home is just creating a designated space for materials, a designated time to organize materials, helping them create a checklist of necessary materials, creating a modified homework routine. So this will also vary, and we'll talk a little bit about this in self-regulation and time management, but having a time where they're doing homework and almost providing a structure for how to complete homework. Some kids need breaks every 20-30 minutes, but helping them kind of create that structure and routine. You can model organizational skills at home. Praise for good organizational skills, any positive reinforcement, because a lot of what executive functioning entails is habitual, and it creates it necessitates actually like a routine to build that behavior. In school, we utilize things like graphic organizers, charts, guided notes, corrective feedback, or explicit instruction. So for task initiation, this is one that I see that can cause a lot of tension, I think, between students and parents, or students and staff. And it's really just their ability to initiate and independently start a task. So this can, include generating ideas, solving problems, or responding to the instructions. So they might need, multiple reminders to start a task, delay chores or homework until they need to rush to finish them on time, frequently ask for help, even with simple tasks, or engage even in problematic behavior to avoid tasks. It is typical at this developmental level for kids to either procrastinate or find ways to put off doing important things that are just non-preferred for them. But if you're seeing this as a common pattern where it's, obviously impacting their school functioning, then it is something that we definitely want to provide some more support around. So to improve task initiation, you can help by breaking down assignments into smaller parts. Kids will often perceive things as taking longer than it does, or being more difficult than it is. So they procrastinate, but it can help to start with something small. I would start with the smallest task just to help build that behavioral momentum. You can help set motivators. So for example, for a 9th grader, I might use like an external reinforcer. So if you do your homework for 30 minutes, then, we'll take a break and have a snack, maybe a preferred snack. If it's a senior, sometimes what I'll do is help them delay something that they want in order to complete a task. So for example, something that I do is I like to treat myself to a walk. That's something I look forward to, and I'm gonna not take my walk until I complete this task. So, kind of helping them modify their own behavior in that way, but it is heavily dependent on their developmental level. Some kids just might need that external reinforcer. Creating a designated workspace to help them kind of get into the mindset of doing work, reducing distractions, providing breaks with an end time. So giving students breaks can go awry. If you say, do your homework for 30 minutes and then you can play on the computer. They might spend 2 hours on the computer and never return to their homework. So make sure that if you are providing breaks, that there is an end time. And you can start the assignment with the child. So reading the instructions with them, kind of organizing the steps to take to complete it. Some students just delay a task because they just don't know where to get started. So time management is, essentially understanding time and how to use it effectively. So essentially, how effectively are they using their time to complete a task? So what I see with kids is two different things that can impede this. The first is, just not allocating the right amount of time for certain things. And the second is actually their perception of, how much time something will take. And that can be affected by different things. For example, if there's a task that's, either more difficult or, the kid's just perceiving it as, this is going to take me a really long time. What I do is I break it down. I help them monitor their own time. So write down what time you started and what time you ended. Sometimes you think it's going to take them an hour. Sometimes it takes them 15 minutes. But a lot of times that misperception in time is actually due to the fact that it's non-preferred. And that task is going to take more effort on the student. So we perceive time differently when tasks are just more purposeful and effortful. So to improve time management, you can create checklists and estimate how long each thing will take, and then reflect back and see how long it actually took them. Break down long assignments into chunks to help with that perceived amount of time, and assign a time frame to completing each one. Use calendars to keep track of long-term assignments, due dates, chores, activities, appointments, things like that. And write the due date on the top of each assignment, just so that it's visual for the student. Self-regulation. So this is also one that I feel like is really important because there are a lot of different factors that are involved in self-regulation. Essentially, it refers to the self-altering of their own response to their inner states. So this might be overriding one response or behavior, replacing it with a less common but more desired response. So essentially, what that means is having the student regulate themselves, in an appropriate way. So this includes delaying gratification, such as, overriding the desire to eat a cookie on their plate and wait, instead for the 2 in the oven. So essentially, delaying gratification. So this can look like difficulty with emotional impulsivity, low frustration tolerance, mood lability, or temper outburst, disproportionate anger or frustration. This we see a lot in students at this age because there are a lot of factors. So hormones play a factor in this. At this age as well, I don't know if it's actually on this. I'm going to go ahead and then go back, actually. I don't know if I have it here. I'll just explain. So neurologically with students at this age, they are more prone to actually respond to emotional stimuli. So they are going to neurologically just have a more difficult time with self-regulation. As well, just, being at this age in high school, they prioritize things differently. Social functioning is a huge priority for kids at this age, and that's developmentally appropriate. So they may respond differently to, interpersonal relationships or social stimuli in a way that might seem that they have difficulty with self-regulation. Self-regulation is something that, again, we want to provide intervention for if we're seeing a big impact or change in functioning, such as interpersonal relations. So to improve self-regulation in your child, you can scaffold the response. So verbally process events with them, helping them kind of create an inner script and appropriate behavioral response. Ask the child to label their emotions. Utilize reflective practices so when they're not in the throes of an emotion. So if your child is really dysregulated, it's probably not the time to start meditation. But different, strategies for self-regulation. A lot of times for kids in school, it's just taking a break, take 5 minutes and go for a walk, do some deep breathing, kind of teaching them those skills and then helping them utilize them. Oh, it was the next slide. Here we are. So yeah, basically there are neurological differences in teenagers that are going to change the way that they respond emotionally to events. As well, there's, metacognitive skills and all of the networks that support them neurologically in the brain. They're just not complete at this stage of development. So, a lot of these skills, these higher order processes are kind of mediated through the frontal lobes. The brain tends to develop from in to out and then from back to front. So that front part of the brain on the cortex is one of the last to fully develop in the human brain. So a couple of recommendations that actually just support a lot of different executive functioning skills. The first is modeling. So kind of allowing your child to see how you function and what strategies you use. For example, you might think out loud, oh, we have a barbecue on Saturday. That means I need to get a head count. We need to go grocery shopping. We need to set up the yard. Let me make a checklist and prioritize, what I need to do first. I need to get a head count before I know how much food to buy. So that's probably what I'm going to start with. So just kind of thinking out loud and showing your kids how you problem solve and how you function in different areas. Provide scaffolding. So this is actually just providing some structure for your student. So for example, if your child is having difficulty starting an assignment, you might sit down with them, read the instructions, go through the different steps, kind of starting to provide that structure for them. Creating a routine is really important in any skill development or behavioral change. Because creating the routine actually takes a lot more mental effort. So if something isn't built into how we already function, it's going to be more effortful. And we're going to, tend to not follow through on a lot of tasks or avoid certain tasks. And consistency. Any behavioral change or skill development requires consistency in order to build, that behavioral momentum. I think what I try and do with kids when I meet with them and talk about executive functioning is really try and have an open discussion around, where are my challenges? Where are my weaknesses? Where are my strengths? A lot of students will show strengths and weaknesses in different domains or sub processes. So your kid might have excellent time management, but terrible task initiation, or excellent planning and organization, but terrible self-regulation. So they can vary within each child. So just kind of having open discussions about, how this is impacting me. What can I do differently? Where might I need more support? And making sure you have those conversations in a time when your child's going to be receptive to it. But again, just kind of shifting the thinking of this is something that's wrong with me to this is a skill that I'm still developing. A lot of self-esteem or self-worth that, kids have is kind of based around efficiency. So we want to just kind of shift that thinking, because when we think of it as a developing skill, it helps put them in that growth mindset of, okay, I feel open to working on this or changing my behavior or trying different strategies. I'm going to stop sharing. And it looks like Ms. Davis said you can enter things in the chat. If anyone just wants to raise their hand, I'm free to answer questions.
Or you could just put in the chat if you don't want to talk. That's okay too.
That's absolutely fine.
One topic that we're going to be talking about in a couple of weeks is the importance of sleep. And I know with my own son, especially with the self-regulation part, which is something that he struggles with, the more tired he is and the less consistent his sleep is, the more that's an issue. So like all of this stuff, a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about this year, it's all interrelated. But yeah.
That's so true. And I'm glad that you said that. And that's something too that I've noticed is making sure that, all of those temporary impacts, it's something that, we can work to kind of control for, so that you can work on, further developing that skill, because it's really hard to develop that skill when you're, you haven't slept or you haven't eaten. And when I do my interviews with kids, if I'm doing an initial and we know that the student is struggling in school, I always ask, how much sleep do you get? Do you have any difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep? Do you eat lunch at school? Do you eat breakfast? Because those even blood sugar levels, can really affect our students. Yeah, good point.
For sure. I mean, one thing that we've discovered and that we started doing because his sleep was getting so out of whack, because every weekend, like we were kind of like, hey, it's the weekend, you can stay up later, but it was like throwing him off. And so what we've, since the school year started, is like, we've been like really strict on the weekends of like, hey, you have to have the same like bedtime and like wake up time. And that has actually helped so much, with just him like staying like in the same routine and like that, especially that self-regulation. Like I just feel like it makes him so much calmer. And like, yeah, he still has a struggle. He's still the kid that's got all of his papers shoved at the bottom of his backpack, and I have to like go through and like, all right, let's put them in the binder. But it just that like we don't have the outbursts that we used to have. And as a parent, when you're struggling with this with a kid, those outbursts are like, that's the worst.
Yeah, definitely.
So any questions that parents have, anything that you're struggling with that you're like, how can, what is a way that we could solve that?
Hi, Ms. Davis. This is Lavanya.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much for all these sessions. I kind of log into them once in a while whenever I don't go to work. I'm working from home some days, but very good topics. Actually, I wouldn't say I'm struggling with this, but this is a concern from me. So my kids are a little bit shy, not too much like, socially outgoing. They're very good in their academics, trying to push themselves without any dependence or push from me. Hey, how you do? I don't need to check anything regarding academics. My concern is more towards the social element. Like, why are you not having fun? You girls are like, 10th graders. The high school is supposed to be fun along with studying, and they both are more into serious into their studies. But I kind of feel, why are they not having fun? And when I talk to them, they're like, no, mom, we are introverts, so we are having fun. We like to do, and I kind of feel, what can I do as a mom to help them, like, relax a little bit, like, take it easy and not be too serious. And when I try to them, they're like, no, we are not shy. If we want, we can talk, but we don't see the need to talk. I don't know how to break that. If I push more, it's an outburst again. It's like, mom, we are not like you. You might be an extrovert. We are introverts. I kind of am like in that situation. I kind of try to read like online, like, how to make my girls more confident and more social. That's any tips from any of the parents or you or anybody? How do I help them, like, to relax a bit?
Yeah. Emily, you got any? I've got a lot of stuff to say about this.
That's a very good question. And it sounds like, just based on what you were telling me, your kids probably have the skills, but they just, choose to do more, introverted activities.
That's what they say, but it's very hard for me to believe. Why are you not having fun? If you think that, I kind of believe they are shy and they're not able to talk, and they have this, I think, some even in the classes, I kind of feel they always want to answer if they know the answer. And I say, no, this is the time and the age. Even if you don't know the answer and if you have 100%, you need to talk. It's okay to fail in high school in your class, with your friends and teacher, and learn. This is the learning time. Instead of that, just shutting yourself and not talking until you know 100% the answer is right, and opening your mouth is not and I don't know how to get it through their heads, that part.
I think, yeah, well, because, like I was saying, at this age, the social, so the social piece is so important. So there might be a lot of fear around the response that they get. So, and, for thinking of it as, they might just be afraid to say the wrong thing, or, whatever social stigma, treating it like a fear, and then, increasing exposure is a really good way to kind of decrease that fear. So for your kids, they might have some preferred activities, maybe creating some structure around that. So let's say, like, if they love to read, getting them involved in a book club, which, actually kind of makes them have to talk and, be a little bit more social in a setting that they're kind of comfortable in. Or if they like a sport, getting them involved in, something outside of school, or having them join the team here, really just kind of increasing their exposure. You might need to start in ways that are a little bit more comfortable for them.
Yeah, that was going to be my suggestions. Like if they're in a club, and I would say like maybe a non-academic club, because it sounds like they're very academic. So having something that is definitely more fun, as opposed to academic minded. A sport would be great. I was also, the book club is a good idea, Emily. And I don't know if they play video games. This is something that we've talked about before. And I think as parents, we tend to not see video games as a good thing, but a lot of video games do have a social aspect, and especially for a more introverted and shy child, that is actually a social interaction. So I wouldn't necessarily discourage that, because that is a way that they can express themselves, and I know it's important, but I also think that this is something that, and I think you said you had daughters, right?
Yeah.
For girls, I think this is something that it's difficult for them to be the one to speak out. I noticed that as a teacher, like the male students are always tend to be the ones that are much more like they're going to raise their hand. They don't even raise their hand. They just shout out the answer. Girls will raise their hand. But I think that it's something that comes a little bit more with age and experience. I'm very like, your daughters sound exactly the way I was in school. Like I tended to be shy. I am a very introverted person. Absolutely. And throughout high school, and honestly, most of college, I probably didn't say a word in all my classes. I was paying attention, like, I knew the answer, but I didn't necessarily say anything. And it wasn't actually until like later in college and in graduate school that I started speaking out more. And I think it's just like as age, you get more confidence in yourself. And I would say like that ability is like, it's a self-confidence thing. So exposing them to different things that they're going to have a ways to express self-confidence. But I wouldn't panic about it. They'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And they are in the badminton team, so they play sports too. So I don't know. I kind of am worried in that aspect. Like, man, these girls are too.
Well, but that's good that they're on a team and like that, because that is, I know it's athletics, but that is also like social interaction. And that's a really good thing for students and for teenagers to be involved in. So that's great that they're involved in that.
Okay, thank you so much. Do we have any session out on any tips on how to grow the self-confidence of kids, or are we done with those sessions?
No, that's a good idea. I'll go look through. That probably blends into some topics, but I'm gonna write myself a note. That's a good idea.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Anybody else have questions? You guys are a quiet bunch today.
Oh, good morning, Miss Davis. It's
Go ahead.
not related to the topic that we discussed, but it's very informative. I just have a concern. When I drop off my daughter, there's a lot of broken glass. I don't know if it's from a car or some drinks. It's close to the portable, I don't know, the main street. It's close to the classroom portable around the area, you know, where the crosswalk, the main crosswalk.
Is it on the city street or on like?
Yeah, it is on the city street. So when I pull over and drop off my daughter, you can see there's 3 different areas of
I know, like,
glasses. So,
Yeah.
um,
okay, we might have to
how?
put a report to the city on that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I noticed it this week. It wasn't last week, but the beginning of this week. Thank you, Miss Davis.
No problem. So a comment in the chat, my daughter is also an introvert. She doesn't ask for help from teachers. She's afraid of talking to adults. She'd rather ask her classmates for help. How do I encourage her to ask questions in class? And Emily, you might have some tips about this too. What I would say is help her at home, help her write out the question. So that, you know, she's got like an actual question and it's not just kind of a vague, I don't understand. Like you can, like this is something you can help her write it out. And then have her, you know, depending on when the class period is, you know, if it's in the beginning of the school day, maybe she can come in a little bit early, or if it's like connected to break and lunch, she can stay after, or if it's like, you know, if it's something where she doesn't have time to do that because she has to go to a next class, maybe she could like just quietly ask the teacher in the class, can I come back at break or lunch and ask a question? And the teacher's going to say yes. I would be shocked if they didn't, because she may be intimidated to ask it in front of the other students. And so asking for a time with the teacher that she could just be one-on-one with the teacher, that may help. And then, like, again, it's like building that self-confidence. So starting little steps like that, like help, you know, it's kind of the scaffolding, like, you know, you're helping her write out the question so that she's got us like a set question that she needs to ask. And then coming in and like, all right, what's asking for a time where she can just ask when she's alone with the teacher, because a lot of times, and I wish students didn't feel this way, but they do. They are really frightened about asking questions in front of their peers. We've done a lot of student focus groups, and many students have said this. And this, I guess, especially because Piedmont Hills is, you know, a high achieving academic school, that they're afraid of like seeming dumb in front of their peers. We as adults know that it's not a stupid question, that like they're not going to seem dumb, and there's probably other students that have the same question, but them getting over that fear is difficult for them.
Yeah, that's actually pretty much in line with what I was going to say. You know, it could be just, you know, other students in the class and how they might perceive her. It could be really just fear of, you know, the adults on campus, or just adults in general. So you can start with, you know, she could either write it down, go up after class, or find an alternative time. But if even that is too fearful, you might even just be able to help her draft an email to her teacher. And this way it doesn't have to be a face-to-face interaction. That might relieve some of the anxiety there.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. Yeah, doing emailing the teacher with the question. Absolutely. Okay, next thing in the chat, my daughter's a freshman. I would like to know when we should start scheduling appointments with the academic counselor. You can schedule an appointment with the academic counselor anytime you want. We don't start the scheduling process until when we come back in January. She will automatically have an appointment with her counselor, so you don't actually have to make one. But if you wanted to have an appointment that you are involved in, that you come in, then you could do that this fall. And just so you know, so that you are aware of like what's going to happen. But the counselors will automatically meet with all of the students. So, other questions you guys have about stuff that your kid is struggling with? This might be a, because I'll send out the recording. And if Emily, if you share with me your presentation, I can send that out too. This might be one that you like hold on to and bookmark and just save, that you might want to come back to and listen later. It's fairly early in the school year. Some stuff you may be seeing already. But you may it may be that later on in the school year, you start like, oh, what's happening? Is this maybe something you want to come back to and listen to again? What I would say, just in my experience, don't ever assume that each school year is going to be the same. That if you get it figured one year, then it's going to be perfect the next year. Because every teacher is different and every school year is different. The classes are different. And so, especially with those routines, like what may work one school year may not work the next school year. And so you have to maybe develop some new routines. But that's a great thing to teach your child, because one of the things that we work on in high school is getting them ready to be adults. When they graduate, either they're going to go off to college or they're going to go into the workforce, and getting them ready to be able to do that on your own, where you're not right there with them, doing all that as support. So I would say that, through the years of high school, maybe their freshman year, you're giving a lot more support. And then it's just, again, that scaffolding, that each year, maybe you're still doing it, but you're backing yourself away. So, the senior, by the time they get to be seniors, maybe you're setting up and making sure in the beginning of the year that they've got their routines down, that they understand what they're supposed to be doing. But hopefully by that time, they're in the groove and they've got it. That's ideal. If they don't have it, don't panic. It's okay. Sometimes they develop it a little bit later.
That's a good point. I'm glad you said that. When we look at even children developmentally, there's usually a window for what's considered typical, and that's because you develop different skills, within a time frame. So some students might just need a little bit more time, reinforcement or structure to build that skill, and that's perfectly normal. I did also just want to share, I'll put my information in the chat. So if anyone, has any other questions or wants to reach out about anything, you can always call or email me.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that, executive functioning is, it's something, like I said, it's very, very common. I think, even though I was listening to Emily's presentation, I was like, yeah, you know what, that's something that I suffer from, because I do have a little bit of ADHD. And so I have found, just as an adult, things that work for me. Like when I have a really big task that I have to get done, breaking it up into little chunks and giving myself little breaks, is kind of a reward. Like, okay, if I work on this for 45 minutes, then I'm going to give myself a 15-minute break, and I can go on Twitter or go on social media and do something else. But a lot of kids that's not intuitive to them. They just think oh, I got to sit here and do this. One thing that I would say that I see a lot, and Emily, you probably have seen this too, with teenagers, is they think that they can multitask way more than they actually can. And so they may be doing homework and they're, on social media, or they're watching something, or they're doing different things at the same time. And so if you see your kid and they're spending hours and hours and hours on homework, that may be an issue. And so that may be something that you need to maybe monitor a little bit, especially if they're doing homework in their room where you're not seeing it. That may be something I might move them into the dining room or something like that, so that you can monitor. Because a lot of times what we find is, if they're taking 4 hours to do homework, how much time are they actually spending on work? And then if they could actually really focus for 30 minutes, and then take a break, but that 30 minutes is devoted to focusing on homework, they get a lot more done. And 30 minutes for some students may be too much, depending on their attention span and how much they can really focus on it, that may be too much. So you may have to start with 10 minutes and see what you can build. Emily, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, that was a really good point. And it's also task dependent. So, if your kid is strong in English and struggles a little bit with math, they might have no difficulty completing their English homework, but math might take 2 to 3 hours. So just to kind of bear that in mind, that they might even just need that support or structure around certain topics that are non-preferred.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's true of everybody, right? Like if there's a task I don't want to do, I put it off. I don't want to do it. And,
yeah, my coping mechanism is to do something else that's productive. So I usually like clean or something before, instead of doing what I actually have to do. But I'm aware of it and I have my strategies.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, but just what you said right there, like you're aware of it. And so a lot of what we're teaching our kids right now is to become aware of struggles that they may have. And so that they are able to develop those strategies for their own, because we can give suggestions on strategies, but it's really individualized and personalized and what is going to work for an individual person.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's an excellent point, Ms. Davis. Actually, my kids, they do hours and hours of homework. They never come out of the room. They say, because they take AP classes and they say, Mom, we have a lot of work, we have tests, we have mini quiz, this, that. And I literally beg them, can we spend half an hour together? I come after 6 o'clock and you're always in your room with your homework and I hardly see you until 10 p.m. And it's lights out bedtime.
Yeah. And, and that honestly, that's probably legit because if a kid is in AP classes, if they're having a heavy course load, there is a lot of work with that. And for that, I would say, hey, take advantage of next week where there's no school and get them out doing something, spend some family time, do something fun, because, take advantage of the time off.
Correct. I planned some trip to take them outside. Otherwise, they're not coming out of the room and books. And one question to Miss Emily, is it okay that, can I tell my girls if they want to talk to you and not able to talk to me at home, even when I ask, is it okay that they can come and see you at school?
Yeah, absolutely. I do a lot of assessment though. So sometimes my door is closed. I recommend, I'm happy to meet with students. So if they email me is probably the best way.
Okay.
If not, then the nurse I work in the nurse's office. We share an office. So usually she'll just let me know. But that's the best way for me to get in touch with kids.
So ahead, write an email to you and get a slot from you. That's how it works. Okay. Mm-hmm. Sure. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions, we'll wrap this up. So next week, we do not have a Zoom with the principal because like I just mentioned, next week is fall break. So I will miss you guys for a week, but I will not be logging on next Wednesday because I'm taking the day off. The following week, though, when we come back, actually, Matt Keesley, our athletic director, is going to be joining us. We're going to be talking about athletics and sportsmanship and all of that good stuff. So hopefully you guys found this to be really informative, I think. Once I learned about executive functioning, and I had been in education for a while before I had actually heard the term executive functioning. So if you had never heard of that, don't worry. It's I'd gone my whole life without hearing it. But once I learned about it, it just so many things made sense. So hopefully this was really helpful. Like I said, this is one that you may want to bookmark and come back to. But thank you guys for joining and asking great questions.
Thank you for
Emily.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
All right. Everybody,
thank you.
Have a great week. Enjoy your week off, hopefully.
Everyone.